York is one of Europe's most historic cities. It began as an important Roman city. In medieval times, a stone wall was built around it, and the wall is still there today. This is the River Ouse near Lendal Bridge. From here you can walk all around the edge of the old city on the medieval wall. It takes about 2 hours. In the south wall is Micklegate Bar, where kings and queens entered the city, and where the heads of traitors were displayed. This is the northeast part of the wall, and the entrance called Monk Bar. In the northwest is Bootham Bar. Inside is the old city of York. High above the narrow streets is the great tower of the largest medieval building in Britain. The cathedral was begun in 1220 and finished 2 centuries later. Its tall, pointed arches are typical of that period. Part of the roof was damaged by fire not long ago. The new roof shows ways of praising God, from prayer to moon landings. If you compare this English cathedral with a cathedral in some of the Catholic countries of southern Europe, it seems bare and colourless. Cathedrals in Protestant England don't usually have colourful paintings on the walls and ceilings. The colour is in the windows. In the centre of this window is a white rose, the symbol of York. Among the stone carvings is this group of 15 English kings, from William I to Henry VI. Other carvings represent people who were buried here when they died. Preserving the past is a continuous job in this historic city. Here, a new discovery has been made. Archaeologists have uncovered the wooden foundations of an ancient building on the south bank of the river. After many weeks of careful digging, they think it was probably a Roman temple from the 2nd century. People in the north of England love their brass bands. Sometimes whole families join a band like this one. York has some unusual museums. At the National Railway Museum, you can go back in time to the days of steam trains. The first public railway in the world was built north of York by George Stephenson in 1825. Trains in those days looked like this. This was the fastest steam train in the world. It did 200 kilometers per hour in 1938. Steam engines like this were the machines of the Industrial Revolution. In the 1800s, they made Britain the world's first industrial nation. The West Yorkshire Moors, where 2 great writers, Charlotte and Emily Bronte, lived. Their best-known books, Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights, were like the Moors, dramatic, austere and romantic. They lived in the 1800s in the village of Haworth with 4 brothers and sisters. Their father was the minister at the village church. The children all died by the age of 30, except Charlotte. Charlotte Bronte lived on alone with her father in this house. Then, at 38, she married. But only 9 months later, she too died and was buried in the village church by her old father. Not far from Haworth is the market town of Skipton. If you're not a farmer, it's hard to understand the auctioneer, even if you're British. But you can still enjoy the drama of the auction.
48, all up from my left, make no mistake, get down, finish where you are, 8 and a half, 9, 49 bit, 49 bit, 49 bit, I'm getting no sharp here down, finish where you are, 49 and a half, 49 and a half, pull them up to 9, 50 bit, 50 round and bit, 50 bit, half again, 50 round.
How many have you here, John?
Hey?
How many have you brought?
140. Don't take all the money. Leave a bit for me.
These farmers speak with a Yorkshire accent. You'll find that each region of Britain has its own accent.
Growing less and more expensive.
That's right, aye. Another 4 season job.
Opposite the sheep market is an old cotton mill. Its tall chimney reminds us of the time when machines were driven by steam. These monuments to early industry are carefully preserved, not always an easy job. In the 1800s, this canal was crowded with boats carrying coal to drive the steam engines, until the railways came. The British loved to preserve their old steam trains. For visitors, it's a good way to see the countryside. You can see Britain's industrial past too. Old towns where mill workers lived, and some of the world's oldest industrial buildings. These ruins remind us of the Industrial Revolution that began in Britain 200 years ago and changed the world. Hatfield House is an aristocratic home that you can visit. It dates from 1608, when James I was king and William Shakespeare was still working in London. Today, the Marquis of Salisbury lives here with his family. The Salisbury family have lived here since the house was built by the first Earl of Salisbury. The first Earl became rich and powerful under Queen Elizabeth I. He and his father before him were Queen Elizabeth's chief ministers. As a girl, Elizabeth herself had lived here in the old Hatfield House, which is now in the garden of the new Hatfield House. Some of the decorations at Hatfield House come from other countries. These paintings are by an Italian artist. They look down on a minstrel's gallery and the great dining hall below. As well as old books, the library contains important letters written by Queen Elizabeth and other people who lived here. Like most very large houses, Hatfield House has its own chapel. The windows here show 12 stories from the Bible. This one is about David and Goliath. All over the house are paintings connected with the people who lived here and their interests. This horse belonged to Queen Elizabeth I. This is the first Earl's father, William Cecil. As the Queen's chief minister for 40 years, he was the most powerful man in England. 200 years later, the wife of the 7th Earl. She was famous for her all-night parties and for giving money to poor people. The designs on these tapestries are called the Four Seasons. They show the life of the 17th century in summer, autumn, winter and spring. The first Earl of Salisbury, like many British people, was a keen gardener. So were most of his descendants. The present owners, the Marquis and Marchioness of Salisbury, keep the gardens as they were in the days of Queen Elizabeth.